So this week we're going to be going over set operators, which are kind of like joints, just the other direction. And I'll explain that in a little bit. So we're going to be going over set operators. And then I also wanted to kind of keep you progressing on your final project. So I'm also going to be drawing out some UML, some frame. One of your deliverables is a UI diagram. So I'm gonna be drawing out a UI diagram for my little project, because I actually decided I'm just gonna build it, and hopefully have it done so you guys can see it all the way done. Because I think it'll be really cool to actually show you, okay, like, because you guys will build the database, you'll do all the work. How does it actually operate on a mobile device? Because I'm hoping to have mine run on iOS, Android, and probably the web. I'm not sure yet. So, but we're gonna try it. But anyways, set operators. So that's kind of what we're gonna do today. But let's get started on some set operators. So set operators are kind of like joins, and so when we do a join. So for example, let's just use our. We're gonna kind of build off this one example here. So if I select everything from customer, you'll notice that I get all this stuff, and including this address ID. So like we went over last week, if we want not only the customer information, but the address information, we do a join. So in this case, I'm going to do an inner join on c.address_id equals a.address_id. And just so you know, for the joins, we will circle back around to joins, go a little deeper. So we'll get a lot of practice in. So anyways, now we can see all of our, not only our people, but the associated address with our customers, which is good. And the way I like to think about it is joins glue information horizontally. You'll notice we went from having, this many columns from here to, that's not what I want. From here to here were our original columns. But then we added these kind of on the side. So we kind of glue them together. And that's why it's important that we match them, right? That's why we have the on clause, is so we can match, to make sure that Loha Avenue in California goes to Patricia Johnson. So we're gluing them horizontally. Now, what if we wanted to go the other direction? What if we want to add on to our list? Right? So a good example is, what if we want all of the people, whether they're customers or staff, all in the same result set? And we can do that. So let's say we want all their name. Let's say we want their first name, last name. So let's just build it right off of here. Let's get a c.first name. c.last name. And with these, it's kind of important that we use aliases. So I'm just going to do his first name just to make sure they're uniform, just in case something is different, but they shouldn't be. Technically, it would just work. Let's get the actual address and the district.
Is where you're placing the commas as you're typing these parts of the query, is that just the normal convention for how you set it up?
There's some people like them at the end. I think the original query makers did it this way. And I was taught by really old school. And so I do it this way. I like it. I think it's easy to read. So you'll notice I put 2 spaces on the first one and then comma space on every line after. And it's easy for me to parse that way.
Cool. Thank you.
Let's get their address and district. We're going to try to keep it somewhat simple. District. All right, so let's just pull this. And there we go. So now we have this, and you'll notice that this is for customer. Well, let's say we want to do the same thing, but for staff. So let's just take and copy this. No need to reinvent the wheel, but instead of customer, and I'm even going to leave the alias. I'm going to say staff. We should be able to just to pull this, and there we go. Now we get our staff. So let's say we're mailing out Christmas cards, and we just want to mail one out to all of our customers and all of our staff at the same time. So we want to make these guys all be in the same list. Like, let's say we're sending it out to a place so they can personalize them and whatever, or maybe we're doing like a drop ship jacket. We're sending a jacket to all of our customers and our staff. So in this case, we want to join these two together. Now, we don't want to join them necessarily because that would put the staff alongside the customers, which would not make sense at all. So really what we want to do is we want to append, and that's kind of the word I like to use, because there's a join, which is horizontal, and this is going to append. We're going to append rows on the bottom. And we can do that by using union all. So this union all is kind of like, hey, add these to the list. The only caveat to set operators is we have to make sure that we have the same columns, basically the same data type. I don't think they know, depending on the database you're using, I don't think they have to name the exact same, but yeah, they should be there. All right, so now you can see we have a total list, and just to make this a little bit more understandable, let's call this customer as type. And we'll do this staff type. And so now we'll actually see where each one of these records come from. And you'll notice we have our two staff members down here at the bottom. So basically we just added the records. So not too complicated. So that's the union all. And the reason we use all is because like you might have read already, if you have union, it will eliminate any duplicates. It's kind of like if we've ever used select distinct, it works the same way, but between the two sets. So let's say that we have a staff member who is also a customer, and he has his info in there exactly the same twice. A union would therefore exclude him, so he only shows once. Now, I don't think that's the case here. But, if we knew that was a possibility, we would want to use union instead of union all, because we don't want to send two jackets, if that makes sense. So in this case, we probably could just keep a union just in case, because we don't want to send people two jackets just because they're a staff and a customer. So that's the difference between union and union all. Is union acts as a distinct, meaning that if the same record as we see it exists here and here, it'll only display it once. All right.
I don't know if you mentioned, but just in case if you did and I missed that, I apologize. But the implication here is that the fields are the same in both, right? So you have to have a first name, a last name, an address, a district, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't think, so like let's just test it here. If I call that address 1. Yeah, so the names don't have to be the same. As long as the data type for that column is the same, it'll work.
I see. Okay, yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
So usually when I do the assignments or when I do the practice, I usually open and work on the terminal. And I was wondering if you can just kind of briefly show me how you do it on the workbench, so you have all of the data at the bottom.
Sure. So the first thing, if you're using a Workbench for the first time, we just got to create this connection. So you'll click that little plus, and you can name this whatever you want. So like I'll name it CIT225 duplicate. And then this is where you put in the information to your database. So like for me, for you, if you're on the same computer that your database is running, it'll just kind of be 127.0.0.1, default port 3306. That should all be there. And then the same info that you use to log in when you go through the terminal, you'll put here. So for me, it's Tanner Crook is my username. And then I'm going to hit test connection, and it's going to ask me for my password. And then I put that in, which is School Rocks. And then it'll say successfully made the connection. And at that point, you can just hit OK. And then it'll show up here. And then once it's here, you can just double click on this, and you'll connect. And then from here, you can have all this fun stuff. And it's actually the same. If you want to use like something else, the process is identical. So for most of these, so like that's dbeaver, or that's Workbench for dbeaver. It's the same. You'll just click the little new connection button, go to MySQL, and same thing. You know, you just put in your username, password, and then we can test the connection, and it'll say connected.
Okay, thank you. But like, how do you display the grid that it's at the bottom so you can actually see the different data in your table?
Gotcha. So in Workbench, and it should just kind of show up when you run a query.
Mhm.
So if I do like use Aquila, we run that, then I say select everything from. It should show up down here at the bottom. If it doesn't, let me know, because I'm sure that there's just some setting somewhere that, or it got hidden. You know, maybe you just need to drag from the bottom, or it could be you know, maybe one of these options is here. I'm not sure, but it should show up right down here at the bottom when you run a query.
Okay, I'm gonna try it. Thank you.
Yep. All right. All right, so that's union. And union just appends them. Now there's a couple other set operators, and this is where MySQL starts to show some of its problems. Because a lot of the set operators are not supported on MySQL. And I think I've already given the spiel how Oracle maintains MySQL, and I truly believe that they actually they don't support some features, because then why would you use their paid database product, which is Oracle? But that's just my hunch. So so MySQL doesn't have them all, and that's why my preference is actually Postgres, because it's free and open source as well, but it has a lot of the fun features. So some of those are there. There's a couple others. There's intersect, and minus. And some of them are a little bit different depending on the database you're using. But ultimately, what they do is the intersect will find commonalities between them. So it's like an inner join, but vertical. So if I was going to do this here, you know, it's going to say that it doesn't do it. But if I was going to do this, I would, if we did have a staff member that was a customer, this would only show those people. And I think this one might be exclude. Yeah. So a couple of the different database systems, they have different words for them. Let's what are the set operators? Just pull it up real quick. All right. Except that's what it is. Not exclude, it's accept. And I think that MySQL does include that one. Maybe it doesn't. So, and in your book kind of tells you, and you'll notice that they use a lot of the same kind of imagery for this. So we have union, which we talked about, union all, which we talked about as well. A minus. So a minus is, and maybe a minus is basically if we wanted to subtract certain rows. So, you know, intersect gets you what's between them. Subtract will say, oh, if there are any duplicates, I want to exclude them. So it kind of does this right here. And similar. So there's a couple, like, so here's our union. Let's see if we can find
Further correct, if you don't mind, I have a question. I was really confused about this because the book seemed to say that union was kind of the, or from my understanding, was the only one that MySQL 8 would really accept. And so then I went and researched all the rest of them on MySQL tutorial. And that also led me to believe that union was really the only one that MySQL accepts.
yeah, I think you're
But now
right.
I'm confused. But now on the quiz, that's how I answered it, and it said it was wrong. So now I'm really confused.
Okay, yeah, I'll check that question because union is the only one I think that MySQL accepts, which is kind of somewhat annoying. Let's see if we can. See if I can show you here real quick. So I have this other database that actually has a bunch of cow information in it. I grew up on a dairy farm, so I kind of made a little thing to track some of my dad's cows at one point. Yeah, so let's take a look at this. Let's select everything from animal. All right, so here's some of our animals. I think they're all the same breed. They all the same. Okay, so we have some genders. So let's just play around with this just a little bit. So let's select everything from animal where gender is equal to. So here's all of our male animals, and let's just do our union all. Let's select everything from animal. Equals female. All right, so here's all of our animals, whether they're male or female. All right, now let's see if there's something we can do to find a join here.
What's a cow have to do to merit a name?
That has to be a pain in the butt to deserve a name. I'm trying to think of a situation that we could use to kind of duplicate these in a sense, so we could so I can show you exclude. Okay, here's a good one. So let's take the where clause off this. We'll just do this. So our select everything from animal, we're going to union all and then select the female. So we're actually going to get some duplicates here because we're going to have the females twice essentially, because see there's N11 and there's N11 again, because we're getting all the animals and we're appending all of the females again to it. Now, if I change this to a union, we get 55 rows. There's our N11, and we don't have N11 again. So, so that's the difference between union and union all. One will give us duplicates, one will take the duplicates away. Now, let's say that we want to exclude the females. So this is just another way. And I know we could just write our where clause, but sometimes, like in the case of our customer, where did we go? In the case of our customer and staff, they come from different tables that we're not, that don't really have any connection. So in that case, the only way to do this is through a set operator, which is why it's really disappointing MySQL doesn't support a lot of those, which has always been one of my reasons why I don't use it in a lot of production environments. But you can see here that we have our accept, and so basically we're getting all the animals, and we are getting everything except, and then we choose what we want to accept. And then additionally, let's try our intersect. And now we should only get females because they exist in the whole list, and we're only getting the ones that match. So anyways, there's basically, I like to think of set operators as joins that go vertical. So our normal joins, our inner join, our left join, our right join, cross join, they all do things horizontally across. They add columns. So you probably saw this in the announcement, but joins add columns. Set operators add rows, or they deal with rows. So joins deal with columns. Set operators deal with rows, because they don't always have to add rows, but they manipulate the rows. All right. You guys will read plenty about that. Does anyone have any questions about those set operators? They're actually, compared to like joins, they're relatively simple, I think. It's kind of just dealing with two sets essentially. You don't have to worry about all the matching and that kind of thing. All right, and Eden asks, are there plans to change that? It's been that way for a long time and it hasn't changed yet. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say no, there are not plans to change that. There is a MySQL equivalent called, and I don't know how to pronounce it, so apologies in advance, but MariaDB. That's kind of a offshoot of MySQL. It may support it, I'm not sure. But it might be worth looking into if you're dead set on a MySQL style database. But the nice thing is most things are the same. Once you learn SQL once, you'll notice like I just ran a lot of the same type stuff on my Postgres database, and so really converting things are very, very simple. Very, very simple. All right. Any questions before we move on to final project type stuff? We're going to try to get a little bit more into like the design aspect. Basically what I'm planning on doing is I'm going to diagram my UI for you, and then hopefully build some test cases to kind of support that. We've done some, but I want to go over that a little bit more, and I need to remind myself what we were doing. So I'm going to take a look at my little ERD here, nice and easy. Nice and easy. All right, so it'll be a nice little example. So before we move on, any questions?
I guess the only question I would have is if you have any tips or hacks or I don't even know what for these quizzes, because man, they are killing me. And like I can run the queries and stuff, but the quizzes, I don't know what it. I'm having a hard time with them.
Yeah, and they are supposed to be really tricky. And just as an FYI, I haven't gone through the last couple weeks because I try to go through them all, and because Canvas gives me a nice like, okay, how many people missed this analytics, and that's kind of usually plus the comments. So I've jotted down specific questions. Some I've fixed, but I got to go through them all and just make sure they're all good. So the only advice I can give on the questions, some are broken, which I apologize for. These questions are kind of new. We went through a lot last semester, but clearly some didn't either didn't get fixed or didn't get catched. But I actually try to take a lot of the quizzes before, but maybe it's because I know what it's looking for enough that it doesn't confuse me. But reading the question very slow and methodical is key, because I know that these questions are very certification level. So they are trying to trick you, and they purposely try to be tricky.
Like
Basically
they
they
turn on a
try,
word. Oftentimes, it seems like they threw a not in instead of, I don't know.
yeah. It's in fact, I remember, because and if you have an issue, feel free to shoot me a message, because I'm more than happy to take a look, and um definitely pretty lenient on that. But I will say, like, just like when I took my certifications, it was which is funny, I had worked with databases for like 5 years at that point. In fact, I worked at Oracle, and I was taking the Oracle certification. I had previously worked at Oracle, and I failed the first time, and I believe maybe a second time. Because the first time I kind of went in and I kind of just went for it, and I knew everything pretty well, but it was just the tricky questions. The second time I was too methodical and I ran out of time. The third time I nailed it. So I would just say read, and then beyond that, if there's an issue, just feel free to shoot it to me. Don't stress over it too much, because we can definitely take a look.
Would there ever be a thought process about giving us an extra attempt or two on them? I'm just
Yeah, I'm very open to that. Like I said, if you have an issue, just shoot me a message, because I usually just handle those things on like a case by case basis. But yeah, I'm very lenient. So if you have an issue with it, just shoot me a message and we can take care of it. All right, let me see if I can share. I'm actually going to try to do this on my iPad, because it always hits me. All right, can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Is it the right side up for you guys?
yeah, looks great.
Okay. Yeah, because I probably, and sorry, you're gonna have to see my my chubby fingers, but yeah, I kind of have to do it this way, because I really stink at drawing with a mouse, and honestly, when you're doing this, like, if this works good, like, I don't care if you do it on paper and take a picture, whatever works for you guys. Like, this is kind of what I like to do. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw my screens, and in my case I have very few, so I'm going to draw my screens, and then what we'll do is next week I'll actually or even this time, what I'll do is I'll label them, and we'll do some test cases to kind of show, okay, when I hit this button, this is what we're going to do in SQL, and that kind of thing. And eventually I mean, I'll do this behind the scenes, but I kind of do the same thing when I actually build the application. I like to kind of do the same process. So anyways, I like to start with a flow. So we're going to start with the login screen. So we're going to start with the login screen, and I am going to kind of just draw it out here. And since mine's kind of going to be mobile, first I'm going to draw it on a phone. If we're being real, I'm kind of making this for myself. I don't even know if anyone else will use it, but we're going to just draw a little phone here. The screens these days are really the whole thing, so we're just going to pretend that it's bezel-less, because I'm not a very good drawer. All right, so it can be pretty simple. When our login screen, so I'm just going to have it be and I called this tasky, so let's ASCII, and we're just going to make it really simple. We're going to have a little box here for email, little box here password. And a button that says log in. Then down here, we're going to have a, yeah, let's not make it a 9. Let's do, just have it be text. Drop password. Something pretty easy, right? Just like nice and simple. And basically what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to label some of these. So I'm going to call this 1. Actually, let's we really don't need that. We're just going to label this login button 1. And we're going to use that later. All right, so nice and easy login screen. I'm going to go down here. We're going to do another one. We're going to do a forgot password. You know what? I'm just going to take this. Somewhere I thought there was a way to copy it, but maybe not. Let's try again. No, that's not what I wanted. Here we go. We'll figure it out yet. Sorry. All right, so there's our little screen here. So we forgot our password. And now what we want to do is we want to be able to reset that password. We want to give our people the ability to reset their password. So what we're going to do now is we are going to have a box. Just have it say, uh-oh. Have a little box that just says email. And reset. And I'm going to give this a little label and I'm going to call this 2. Basically, for every action, I'm going to give it a number so we can kind of see it. And now that we know what we're doing, let's and I'm really bad at this, aren't I? Did it again. And it fixes it for me because it's smarter than I am. There we go. Drag you down here. And then this is where you would click it and it would have you open up an email. You would reset your password on the web. I'm not going to necessarily build that into the app because actually, no, we could. And let's not, because I'd have to build more tables. So we're just going to leave it just like that. It's going to be simple. So now what we want to do is we want to go into some of our, yeah, sorry if it's a little blurry. That's it's about the best I can do. So now we're going to jump into the actual application. So that's kind of like the boring login stuff. And now we're going to actually get into the details of our application here. So now what we want is kind of like our home screen. And this is kind of going to be, I guess you could say, a one-stop shop. There's only going to be a couple screens in my little application because I'm kind of just doing a demo. So not too many tables and stuff like that. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to have a little account thing up here. So we're going to draw our little person icon up there in the top right. And I'm kind of making this up on the fly, so apologies, but we're going to we're going to kind of have like a, let's say a section down here that is our report. And this is subject to change because I really haven't gone through this all too much.
In our
But we're
wireframes in the deliverable, are you going to be looking for this level of detail in different screens? Is this kind of the standard that we should be shooting for?
it's kind of there's not exactly a set thing I'm looking for. Basically, I just like to go through a workflow. So like if you're doing a store, show show like oh, how, this is my home screen. Here's where I show all my products. And when I click the button to add to cart, what happens, and then once I have a cart, when I click the checkout button, that kind of stuff.
Cool. Okay.
And this one's going to show you more like where I think most people will start is on this home screen. Because really what I'm going to do is I'm planning to have a report that has a basically what I kind of want on this screen is kind of like an aggregated, like, okay, per my for my last X number of days, which I'm going to have a little buttons here. So let's say for 1 day button, 1 week button, and a 1 month button. So I'm going to have three buttons. So basically you can toggle between the aggregates, and basically this is going to be like a little table, and it's going to have my categories. So like I'm just going to say category name and the total time that was worked. So, you don't have to do this a lot. Like, you don't have to be super detailed. I just kind of want to throw it in there. So basically I want to have a report where I can click like, okay, in the last 1 day, how much time did I put in for my different categories? In the last week, what's the total time? And in the last month, what's the total time? So that way it's just kind of nice. So you can just toggle and kind of get a quick idea of where you're at. And then right here, we're going to do like, do one button here. It says plus entry. I'm going to do another one here that says clock in. Because I kind of want to be able to give myself like, okay, I'm either going to record a historical entry or I'm going to clock in and start a new entry from scratch, if that makes sense. Because a lot of times, like I'm working and, let's say that I'm working, but I'm off doing things, or I say, oh, I'm just going to sit down for 5 minutes, do this thing real quick, but it turns into 3 hours. In a lot of those cases, I'd hit this entry button because I want to record it after the fact. So then I could say entry, okay, what report, 5 hours, okay, save, and then it'll show up. Or I can say clock in. The other situation is if I say, okay, I'm going to sit down or if I'm going to like a meeting with one of my clients, I could say, okay, I'm going to clock in and start, and then it'll keep track of it for me. And then this button will then change to a clock out once I'm clocked in. So let's have a running total up here. Right? That when we clock in, that'll start a time. And obviously up here, we want a category selector. And this one's actually going to be a little drop down. So that way, if I want, I can just say, okay, for this client, check in, and it'll start the time. Cool. And then over here, I just want to have a little plus button
Do you have a variable rate that you would charge for different services that you would attach to each entry? Like,
I could, but I kind of want to build this like super generic, to where, because obviously like rates might change depending on the task, so on and so forth. So I kind of want to keep it pretty minimal. And so, yeah, so basically I'm because like I also could say like, oh, how long does it take me to mow the lawn? I could just like start a timer, but maybe I want to track it over time, right? Because maybe like, or maybe I'm having like a deal with my wife where she says, oh, it only takes 5 minutes to do the dishes every day. And I'm like, well, this is how much time I spent doing the dishes every week. Whatever. I kind of want to make it pretty generic.
dream.
Yeah. So kind of want to keep it generic. So I'm gonna keep it generic. And I'm actually gonna change this just a little bit now that I'm thinking about it. Because I kind of want to just do a little plus button here. That's going to be our plus to add an entry. I keep changing my mind. I want to be able to add a category as well. So we're going to have a button for both of those. And then I don't really like the way this is laying out. There's lots of buttons. But maybe I just like I also want a way just to like view my entries, right? All my entries. Actually, no, we're going to leave that off because we'll click on the aggregation at the bottom to be able to do that. So let's leave it right there for now. I don't like this empty space, but when I actually go to build it, I'll probably change some stuff. Like I said, it doesn't have to be like super crazy. All right, and so the last one I'm going to show you is our so let's add a category. Oh, and I forgot to mark these. So we want let's start with here. We're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4,
What
and
is the
5.
what is the program that you're using on your iPad here?
This is just the Notes app that comes
Okay.
on it. It's really nice though. I've actually I used to think iPads were kind of dumb, but I love it now. So just for stuff like this, it's really nice for jotting notes. All right, so we have our little. So now what I want to do is I want to show, okay, what happens when I click add a category. Let's see, what time is it right now? Okay, yeah, we got some time. We got 15 minutes. I'll hurry because I'll skip a couple, but I want to show some of the cases once I get it built. Once it's kind of diagrammed. All right. So when we add a category, and you'll notice that I'm kind of numbering these because what I'll do is when I write my SQL on my computer, I'll say home screen 1, and I'll write my SQL that it does. Home screen 2, write the SQL that it does. And in this case, it actually isn't going to do anything because we're getting there. Those are actually just going to open up other windows. So I could just draw an arrow there. All right, so when we add a category, and it got blurry. There we go, focus it. I'm just going to put some text here. We're going to say add category so that we know what we're doing in case we decide to leave and come back. So we're going to say the category name. And this is where we kind of would want to look at our diagram. And in fact, let me pull that up because I can't remember what I even had in a category. Okay, so we had a name, a color, and an icon. So let's, I'm just going to draw a little circle here. We'll say color. And then I'm going to draw another little circle for icon. And basically you could tap on color and pick a color, tap on icon, pick an icon. And then we're going to have save. All right. And this is going to be the only button here. We're also going to have a back arrow this way. But this one is really going to be our key component for add a category. There's that one, which is pretty easy. And next we're going to do an add entry. And this one's probably going to be the second most complicated one that we'll show. So our add entry is going to be similar, except for we're just going to have to add a lot more stuff. All right, so we're going to have, and in this one, it's going to be a little tricky because basically we're either going to do one thing or the other. So if we choose to clock like a start time, end time, and we'll do something like this. Start time. And these are date pickers, date time pickers. So there might actually end up being like a date and then a time little bubble here, but you get the picture. And then we can say, or, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to set category here, which is important. We want that. Just scoot you up. And our category is a drop-down menu because you'll want to click it and choose one of the categories you've already kind of set up. Or we can set in, that's really big. Manual minutes. A little box there. All right, and you can just hit save and away we go. So let's go ahead and we'll just give this a label of 1 here as well. And those are just attached to those save buttons. So that's going to be pretty good. And so really what I'm going to start with is our login screen. So now that we have that, what I'm going to do is I will stop sharing here. So let's keep that in mind here for a minute. And I'm going to share my desktop again because we are going to actually kind of diagram some of that stuff. And if we need to, we can flip back to it. So I kind of have some samples here from already creating and filling up some test data. But I'm actually going to, let's create a new one. Where's my local host? Open a new SQL script. And let's make sure we have Tasky here. There we go. All right, so system user is going to be our main thing here. So in a previous video, we kind of already filled our database up with some test data. Let's make sure we use Tasky. So we should already have a person here. So we have Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan is our first user. So we're kind of going to use him here as an example. So when people hit that login button, this is our use case. So I'm going to say login screen number 1 because I labeled my login button as number 1. So when they hit that login button, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say select. And we can just select everything actually. So let's just select everything. from system user where email is equal to obi1@jedi.net. Now remember, this is a test case, right? All you have to do is build test cases. So normally this is where we would pass a variable, right? This is where whatever they typed in the little box would go there. But in this case, we're just going to simulate it. That's why it's called a test case. So where email is equal to is email and password is equal to Blue Saber. We can run that and we get our OB1. So that's number one. And in this case, this is an example of a read. So if you remember our CRUD operations, let's just say test cases, make a nice little format here. Get you out of the way. Create. Read. Update. So this is kind of going to be our guiding principles as to like, okay, what are we doing in this case? So in this case, I'm reading, right? We're selecting, we're reading from our database. All right, so nice and simple. And now let's do a forgot password.
Would you have to, would you have to mimic, so I don't know how to word this. So you would have to put in some sort of pass fail, right? So if the user enters OB1 and as the email and then Great Saber as the password, that would be a fail. So therefore login would not be granted. So do you have to account for all of these things, or is that simplistically done, which I'm fine, by the way?
Yeah, because there's level 1, which is our database, right? And a lot of that type of stuff is going to be handled in the software level. So all we're worried about for this project is the database level stuff. So for me, it's what query would I have to write to get that information from our database? Because what we're going to do is we're going to pull this in, and then in our software logic, we would say, oh, if the system user ID, if the user ID is null, then obviously they didn't put their password in right. Something like
So
that.
you just have to make considerations for what would the software be doing alongside SQL.
Yeah, and you don't even have to do that really. Like if you want to jot it down, that's fine. Like if I wanted to, I could add a note here that's just said that'll say will return the system.
Validation done by Visual Basic or whatever.
Yeah, and you don't have to do any of the validation. We're solely worried just about the database portion of this. So thinking about how you handle it's fine, but in most cases, we're just worried about how are we getting the information from the database, and then the software. It could be a black box. We don't know how it works, but we're just saying, hey, I will pull the information for you. This is how I pull it. How you handle it, it's up to you. We're not worried about that for this exercise.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. So, like if you want to, you could kind of throw something like that in there, but even that isn't required. All right. And so if they forgot their password, because like, again, like, we're not going to require you to build the whole system. And so if they forgot their password, we just want to update it, right? So in this case, we're just writing an update statement. We're going to say update system user, set password equal to Purple Saber, where email is equal to obi1@jedi.net. Something like that. So there's already 2 of our screens done, right? And already we have a read and an update. All right, so now I'm going to skip to where we actually add our categories. So I'm going to skip the home screen for now because we're running out of time. So I'm just going to say add the category screen. And this is actually supposed to be number 1 here. Oh, because the number will refer to our button. So the first, we only have 1 on this one as well. So when we add our category, it is a create because we're adding a new record. So we're going to create a record and we're going to say insert into category. And what's nice is if you use some of these IDs, you can right click on here, generate SQL for your table. And we're just going to get our insert statement, copy it. And I'm actually going to save some keystrokes and just do that right there. All right, and our user ID is here. We're going to want to select user ID from user system user, where email is equal to obi1@jedi.net. Perfect. And that will query the user ID for Obi-Wan. Our name is let's say he's keeping track of his Jedi training. He bills Yoda by the hour for training Anakin, which honestly, there isn't enough money that he could charge to train Anakin. There's our Jedi training. Our color, let's say we want it just to be white. You know, that's our little hex. And this is, again, where you just choose how you want to store it. And then I'm going to use Font Awesome. So I'm going to kind of say like Font Awesome -hammer, which is our kind of thing there. So this is an example of how we add a category. And then there's our create. Let's say we had an option to delete one. Like let's say we could go into our categories and delete, which I kind of forgot on my UI. But let's say that we can, let's say we forgot one, or so delete category, or let's do edit category screen. So if we're going to edit, let's say that's number 2 on our list, which is a delete. Yeah, we can just even at this point say category ID is equal to 1. So we were to run this, boom, there we go. And we could then delete it just by running this one. And anyways, cool. So yeah, so that's some of our test cases. We'll pick up on this next week because we're out of time. And I don't want to, I try really hard to just keep it to an hour, but hopefully this kind of helps you see how you can put it together. Basically you just draw out your screens and then just start thinking like, oh, when I click the add category button, you know, what is it going to do? Well, it's going to insert into category. If I hit the login button, I'm going to try to pull information for a system user. If I list, so like real quick, if we were just going to do our home screen real quick, and we want to list our stuff, which was number 5, read, and we can even list the category with aggregate time. You know, in this case, we would write our select statement, which this one would be a little bit more intensive, where we would select the category, and then the sum of minutes, you know, something like that. You know, and we would write our query. so on and so forth. So you need at least like one of each of these, which should be pretty easy. Realistically, like your system should be pretty easy at those. Does anyone have any questions? We'll pick up on this again, but hopefully it's enough to get you started. But does anyone have any questions before we end this meeting? All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. I'm going to actually try to kind of clean up some of this, so I can maybe send. My goal is to actually have this done a little early, so I can send it out as an example. So if you want to look at like a little mini example, because obviously I don't have 12 tables or anything like that, but you can at least see like, okay, what are some of the example deliverables in a small, easy to see package that's hopefully easy to understand. But anyways, thanks for being here. I hope you guys have a good week. And yeah, thanks for coming. If you need something, let me know.
Somebody just put a question in the chat.
Yeah, I saw that. Let me